It's time for Twig. This week in Google, Gina Trapani has the week off, but Jeff Jarvis and I will solve all of Google's issues. We'll figure out exactly what Google should do in 2012 as we take a look back at 2011. It's our year in review episode next on Twig.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT. Bandwidth for This Week in Google is provided by Cachefly. Cachefly.com. This is Twig, This Week in Google, episode 127, recorded December 28th, 2011, the year in review. This Week in Google is brought to you by Ford, featuring voice-activated Sync App Link. Now you can control select smartphone apps with your voice, so you keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road. Check it out on the 2012 Ford Focus and at Ford.com/technology. And by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies on your PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or TV instantly, all streamed directly to you, saving you time and money. For your free 30-day trial, visit netflix.com/twit. It's time for Twig! This Week in Google, our special year-end episode. And yes, I know, I'm not sitting at the Twig table today. I'm actually in my studio, and that's because it's just the three of us, two of us.
We're batching it today.
We're batching it.
I feel like I'm in your
inner sanctum.
Your den, yes.
Let me get my pipe out. So, there you go.
Back on the ball. There you go.
And I'm back on the ball. Yeah, this is kind of like we used to do Twig.
Yeah.
Gina's not here.
I was looking at an old Twig yesterday, and I forgot about the claustrophobia of the cabinet versus
right.
Your spacious life now.
Right. Somebody tweeted, you ruined the cozy atmosphere of all of the Twitch shows by moving to this, what do you call it, cold, giant studio. And I don't feel that way, but
I don't at all. I don't know.
I think it's nice to have a little room to stretch out, and I'll tell you who really thinks that. It's our employees we have 19 employees, full-time staff here in the building, and they used to all sit around a big table.
They were tripping over each other.
It wasn't good. They would have killed each other. It's like that experiment with rats on the island. They would have just started killing each other. So it wasn't really an option, to be honest. We had to. But we kept this room. We duplicated the old studio, so it feels a little bit like we're in the old studio.
Yeah.
Jeff is on the big screen. So
I
Gina's
have nothing to say about science fiction.
Good. I think we've done that.
Boy, you guys did it. Great show.
Gina Trapani, who is normally, of course, the third spoke of the hub, the third leg of the tripod.
The tallest flagpole on whatever.
she's frankly the reason we do this show. Is on a plane, probably home from
her way home from New York.
From New York, because she was with her family in Brooklyn. I was with my family in Massachusetts. Did you have a nice holiday?
Yes, I did. My parents are in from Florida, which is where parents go.
Yes.
And so we've had a good time.
Good. And Jake's home from college.
Yep.
Everybody's hanging out.
Everybody's here, just hanging out.
It's I like Christmas. I know it's one of those holidays that really can make people crazy, but I actually like the chance to kind of hunker down, think about the year gone by, and prepare for a new year. And that's exactly what we're going to do on this episode, is take a look back at the year 2011 at Google. It was an amazing year for Google. In fact, Jeff, of course, I should mention, is a professor of journalism at the City University of New York. He's a well-known blogger at buzzmachine.com, brilliant blogger there, and author of a number of books. His most recent is called Public Parts, which is about living in public. But he also wrote a book called What Would Google Do?, which was almost a thought experiment using Google management practices in the outside. Now, would you rewrite that book given what has happened? The biggest change at Google this year was new CEO.
No, I wrote a new afterword for the paperback edition, which is out now.
Oh, good.
And looked back and was grateful that probably my rules were all such BS that they stood up. Such vague generalities that it worked, but they kind of stood in.
Well, I'm proud to say I have the autographed hardcover. Yeah. Good.
And the thing about it is that I luckily did predict in there that the wars they were going to have going forward were mobile, local, and social, and that's been the case, and that's where their focus has shifted.
Very astute.
I mean, I think this is a year when we saw Google truly shift from being a search company as a product to becoming mobile, local, and social, thanks to Android and thanks to Google Plus now.
Eric Schmidt said that he was adult supervision. He was brought in by Google's founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who met at Stanford and created Google at Stanford, and then formed a company, Google, which is now, is it 13 years old?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
We should know, but
we should know. Well, I remember they celebrated, I want to say 13, in there anyway. And at some point, not too long after, maybe 10 years ago, they said, we need as often happens with startups, we need a professional CEO.
Or their board said it.
Yeah, maybe not Larry and Sergey. Maybe their board. Although I think that they made a very good triumvirate. Yeah.
They did. They really did.
Often founders will kind of, as I have done here, will step aside for somebody who actually knows how to run a company, provide the vision thing and so forth. Eric Schmidt came from Novell, was an absolutely accomplished CEO, but also I think, and this was I'm sure important to Larry and Sergey, an engineer and really understood technology. And I think he was a good CEO for 10 years.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that Larry Page clearly was studying and learning in that time. And I think what happened is that it got to a point where he said, I'm ready now. Eric, why don't you become chairman of the board? And, Eric's still involved. At Le Web, he was very much, a spokesperson for Google.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think that, the question is, it wasn't just Larry learning, it was also Eric teaching.
Right. This was part of the plan.
Yeah, and I'd love to see, I hope at some point they tell that story. But knowing that was going to happen, knowing that you were going to have a succession, and every good company should, getting a founder with the vision in the right position and the company in the right position so that it can go forward, that's really the brilliant thing that they did. And you got to give Eric a lot of points. And you got to give, I think for that matter, both Larry and Sergey points for pulling back enough to learn. And by all accounts it worked. But what's fascinating now is we start to see, it's like when you get an Android version without the Motorola or the Sprint stuff added. Now we're getting Google as a pure Android in the sense we're seeing Larry's strategy come to life.
And while it was unclear when Larry kind of reorged the company and took over in April, it was unclear what that would portend. I think that now, 8 months later, I think we all can agree he's done a masterful job. He has reshaped the company.
Wouldn't you have thought it was the opposite? A creative founder like that would have wanted to have 100 pet projects going.
Yeah.
And he did exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
And maybe that was the real brilliance in the end of the 20% rule, was that it allowed all these flowers to bloom so they could figure out which were flowers, which were weeds, and start to really focus on what Google is and what it has to be. They had their time in kindergarten.
I think he may have been inspired by the only other example of this that I know of a founder coming back and running the company, which was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, when he was forced out by the board of Apple, was not ready to run Apple. He wasn't put aside. In fact, although I have to say, John Scully late in a recent interview said, "I wish we had kept Steve, but just done what happened at Google, I gather, which was keep him, but not let him run the company because he was too immature to run the company." He did come back and ran the company well, and according to Isaacson in his book about Jobs, Larry Page, despite the hatred that Jobs had for Google, Larry Page did count him as a mentor.
Yeah.
And one of the things Steve Jobs said is say no to 1,000 things. Mm-hmm. Focus. And I would say that is, I don't know if that's where Larry got it, but that's what Larry's doing. He cut so much this year.
Yeah, and I think that it also comes to understanding that your structure is, and this is true of any company, your structure as a company can't hold up with all that stuff going on. We complained on this show over the last 2 years, probably a year before this, one of our big complaints was that there was a Chrome OS going and there was an Android OS going, and right hand wasn't talking to left hand, and there didn't seem to be a clear strategy. And one way you do that is by getting tough. And Larry's gotten tough.
Yeah.
And he's restructured around that. And he has brilliant people at his top layer. I mean, the one we deal with because of Google Plus and all that is Vic Gendrotra, but he's really quite amazing.
Yeah.
And other folks like that. He reorganized to get the right structure into what they want to accomplish. He knows what they need to accomplish. So, we'll see where this goes in 2-3 years. Things could go south, but I think it's very impressive. Running start off the launch pad. Mixing my metaphor is terrible. In a way that Steve would never approve of in science fiction.
I started with a tripod thing and it was downhill. Actually, I think it's interesting because this all does trickle along. And one of the strengths that Silicon Valley and San Francisco have is that everybody influences each other. So Jobs maybe influenced Larry Page. But then I think Larry Page's reorganization of Google has influenced Mark Zuckerberg, who did something very similar just a couple of weeks ago. He put 5 people in charge, created a kind of a committee of 5 to run the company in the critical areas, very much like Larry did. So the timeline for Larry is he took over in beginning of April. That's when Eric Schmidt stood down. He returned as chief executive. I'm reading the article here from the LA Times. He returned as chief executive of Google Monday. By Thursday, 3 days later, he reorged the entire management team. Jonathan Rosenberg resigned, and Page created this kind of key executive team. So Andy Rubin became senior vice president of mobile. He's the guy at Android. Vic Gundotra, you mentioned, is now senior vice president of social. Sundar Pichai became the third in that group as a senior vice president of Chrome. Salar Kamangar became senior vice president of YouTube and video. And Alan Eustace, senior vice president of search. Susan Wojcicki, I don't know how you pronounce it, Wojcicki, senior vice president of ads. So what happened was essentially Larry not only elevated these people, but defined 6 key areas: mobile, social, Chrome, YouTube and video, search, and ads.
Right. And that is exactly what the company is, isn't it?
Yeah, if you think about it. Although it's almost now trivial to say it's an advertising company, first and foremost. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
That's what people say.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. 100%. But that's like saying the New York Times is an advertising company. NBC is an advertising company.
Good point.
Now, then we get into the argument, is Google a media company? And Siva and some others are, no, I think it's, it's Bob Garfield on the media who argues that it's a media company. David Carr argues it's a media company, I think, most prominently. I'm not so sure I agree with that because I think that media presumes a notion of creating and owning content.
Well, Google
which has not
made some moves in that direction, though. They bought Next New Networks and have funded $100 million. We'll talk about a little bit more about that, but have funded $100 million worth of new production for YouTube.
But even there, they're trying to get others to succeed. So
Right.
I mean, it's the old model where Procter and Gamble funded soap operas and Northern Exposure to have a place to advertise to change the media. I think that's where they still are. It still need to be.
Right. Yeah, good point. I think that when Larry and others say Google's business is making the web better because when you use the web, we make money, that's really a statement of what their business model is, their business plan is. We make money in ads. They leave that part out, but that's how they make the money. And same thing with Android.
Yes. And both Android and Google Plus are, I argue, are about, I've said this before on the show in the last year, but hey, it's a review show, so I can repeat myself. It's about signal generation. It's about knowing more about us.
I agree.
When you get around whatever privacy issues there are, so that you can target services, content, and advertising to each of us.
The way I imagine it happening in the boardroom or at the exec-com meeting is, oh crap, our core business, which was search, is shifting. That social signals are now really important. Who has all those social signals? Oh crap, Facebook does. Who did Facebook do a deal with? Bing. Oh crap. So what do we need to do? We need to get that kind of social data into our search. How do we do that? We create a social network. Does that sound sensible?
Yeah, but I think it's even more than that. I think that they've actually followed Mark Zuckerberg's argument, which is they didn't create a social network, but they've made their business social. And that's what Mark has been arguing.
Interesting
is that every
distinction.
business will become social, right?
Right.
And so with Mark's case at the last F8, he takes it through so that in Facebook's world, first games became social, now music becomes social, next news becomes social. If you look at Amazon, retail becomes more and more social. So at Google, they're trying to make, don't even call it search, call it finding information social, creating information social. Those things I think matter a lot. And so it's not so much that, and we've said this, and Gina said this too, it's not so much that Google created a social network, it's that it really believes that social becomes part of everything it does. And the irony here is that follows the suggestion of none other than Mark Zuckerberg.
Well, and huge growth on Google, although people dispute these numbers. All the numbers come from Google. No, actually, that's not true. Numbers come from also outside people. Google's not been very forthright, but very big growth on Google+, continuous growth. And it doesn't feel that way when you use Google+. But lots of people using it. I think because it's so omnipresent in anything you do at Google now, with the Google bar and everything, that people just join or they create a profile just because it's part of having a Google account. Doesn't mean they use it or even read it.
Yeah, and I've seen reports that Google will get to 400 million profiles on Google Plus soon. I've seen some arguments this week about, well, that's just a prediction. I think within the year, somebody argued. Argument is that it's now 65 million, but there's arguments against that it's that includes Gmail, and so who knows what it really amounts to. But I don't think it's hard to imagine Google as a worldwide company getting up to that much. And again, we don't even have to have a profile there for Google to know things about what we do. Right? Through search, through Chrome, through Android. But
it's so much better if they can add your age, your income, who your friends are. A social graph is not merely what you do, but it's who you know.
Exactly. And that also, Leo, I think at some point gives us potentially, if they do it right, more control then over what they know about us, which is better for them in terms of privacy concerns and also better for them in terms of getting more accurate information. And so, I tell news companies these days that they should stop the notion of and you said this too, when you talked about, it's a post that I have half written and never put up, but when you said you don't want TWiT to become too big, that would be a real mistake. I think that's something that news companies don't realize, media companies don't realize, because they always sold bulk and mass.
They go for numbers.
Right. And so my argument to media companies, news companies lately has been stop counting page views, start counting relationships. And stop saying that all relationships are equal. Start understanding that some relationships are more valuable than others. I wrote a post about a week ago arguing that, and this wouldn't work, but as a thought exercise, if you took the New York Times paywall and turned it on its head, and let's imagine that you said to somebody, hey, you got to pay a $20 deposit to get into the Times. But then every time you add value to the Times, you're going to get a credit. Every time you look at an ad, every time you click on an ad, every time you add a comment people like, every time you help report. I mean, you can imagine all kinds of things.
We need to measure. They need to measure that because that's the value.
And then also reward that.
Right.
So the irony of the paywall is we're punishing our most valuable readers and we're letting our least valuable readers get a free ride.
Right.
It's bass backwards, as my West Virginia father would say. And he's in town, so I think this way now.
I love that. I love that model. I wish somebody would do that. That's a great model.
So, it probably wouldn't work because you still have the problems of abundance and so on and so forth. But what it says is it makes us look at the value of each reader and reward that value and recognize that value. And so I think that Google and Facebook are clearly in that mindset, and media companies are not. And the more they have a relationship with you, and that's what Google Plus means, that they have a relationship with you, that you have your profile there, that not only that they know who you are, that you have some control and mastery over your domain. The more they think that way, I think the better off the internet will be. But it'll still make some people feel creepy.
We're taking the year in review for Google, and this week in Google, Jeff Jarvis and Leo Laporte. And I know Gina is sitting on that airplane somewhere over the United States, gnashing her teeth, saying, I want to be there, I want to talk. So next week we'll get her opinions on all of this, too. We're going to take a little break and come back with more. There was so much to talk about Google's acquisition of Motorola. Andy Rubin tweeted this week that on December, what does he say, 23rd and 24th, there were 7.5 million Android activations in 2 days. This was the year of Android as well, no question about it. Google killed a whole bunch of stuff we'll talk about. We should do in memoriam. You know, maybe we should produce this. You know how they do at the Oscar ceremony, all the people who died this year? We could have like a tier. We could have Mariah Carey come on and sing, you know, a sad song and do a slow montage of all the Google things that died this year. Maybe we'll do that. I'll get the editors to work.
Who on the staff can sing? Eileen, can you sing?
And what would we sing? We'll think of that, and we'll come back with more in just a bit. Before we do, though, I do want to say hello to our friends at the Ford Motor Company. They've been a big supporter of this show. We are so grateful to them for keeping TWiT afloat with their advertising dollars. And, you know, I drive a Mustang, and I am very, very happy. Actually, we've been talking about getting another Ford in the family. I love that Ford Flex. Great family vehicle. And I can't wait to get the 2012 electric Focus. But the thing that for me is absolutely must have in every vehicle now, got to have sync. And the new Fords, and this is one of the reasons I can't wait to get a new one, have this new AppLink feature. Let's take a look at Ford Sync with AppLink, a little something we recorded a couple of weeks ago when we had a chance to test out the new 2012 Ford Fiesta.
Hey, Leo Laporte, Brick TWiT House, and once again I want to show you the cool stuff Ford is doing in their new vehicles. This is the 2012 Ford Fiesta. Very affordable car with great features, including the Ford Sync. I want to show you how Sync now can use mobile apps on your phone, like Pandora, Stitcher to listen to iPods, Pandora to listen to music, OpenBeak to listen to tweets, and they just added Slacker Radio, too. It's pretty amazing. First, let's get in the car. Almost everything you do with this Ford Sync, you do with your voice. And I kind of like that. So here's the Ford Sync button here on the turn signal. Let's turn the car on, and I'll show you how it works. Let's have Pandora running. I'm going to connect this to the USB connector. Notice USB connector right here. I'm using the standard iPhone cable. That's great because it's also charging the phone while I'm listening to it. I can just keep it here, make phone calls, and I do it all with my hands on the wheel, my eyes on the road. Just press this button.
Mobile apps, please say a command.
Pandora. So now my Pandora is connected, and I can listen to a station. Let's say I'll play a station, Lady Gaga. How about that?
Pandora, please say a command.
Play station Lady Gaga. So now I'm listening to Lady Gaga. This is great because it means as I'm driving along, I can listen to songs that I love from artists that I love. I can even create new stations. If I don't like a song that's playing, I can thumbs down it. If I like it, I can thumbs up. In fact, let's do a thumbs up right now.
Pandora, please say a command.
Thumbs up. Thumbed up. How about skip?
Pandora, please say a command.
Skip. All right, now we're rocking. This is all streaming in via 3G, so I can be just driving down the road listening to great radio. If I want more information about a song or I want to buy a song, I can tell it. I can create new stations. So the beauty of this is I don't have to take my eyes off the road. I know it's on the display there, but I don't have to. I can just drive along and I can say, oh, what was that song? And it will tell me. I just love that. So you can see how easy it is. You can listen to podcasts using Stitcher. You can listen to music using Pandora. You can even have your tweets read to you with OpenBeak. That's the sync with the new AppLink. More and more apps all the time, which means more capabilities from Ford Sync. And you don't have to do anything. As long as you got the apps on your phone, that's all you need. Pretty cool. Drive one today at a Ford dealer near you.
I have and will. Take a look, Ford.com/technology for more information. We are going back in time with Jeff Jarvis, taking a look at the year 2011 in history, well, in Google terms. And one of the things we cannot go without mentioning, Jeff, is Eric Schmidt and his malaprops. It was, some people might have said, that's why Eric's no longer CEO. Of course it's not. I think that transition was long planned. And I think in some ways, at least speaking as a tech journalist, I love Eric Schmidt. He gives us something to talk about.
When I talked to him for Public Parts, we went over, I think it was the episode of him talking about young people should be able to erase their identity at age 21.
Yeah.
And I had always said in blogs and here on this show, it was a joke. And he, flustered, says, it was a joke. It is a joke. It always will be a joke. and part of the problem here is that, should somebody who's smart really make themselves stupid just because they're talking public? Should they make themselves less funny or ironic because some people don't get irony? Well, yeah, I guess in some companies you should, but Eric Schmidt's a really smart guy, and he says what he thinks. He doesn't always say it in a well-packaged way. And that's the other reason, one of the things that I like about Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
Early on when he was on panels and such, he would literally say what he thought in 5 words, period, stop, big stare.
Right.
That's what geeks are like. Get used to it, people. They're blunt. They say what they think.
I like engineers. I hate interviewing CEOs. I hate interviewing marketing people. I love interviewing engineers because, an engineer, it's either true or it's not. It's black and white, and they say the truth. And and that's it. But, of course, every CEO has gotten very good at spinning these days. Not Eric Schmidt. Never really never learned that skill, or maybe unlearned it. I wouldn't be surprised if he decided to become less polished in some ways. The most recent proclamation from Chairman Schmidt was at Le Web, where he unaccountably, and Google's spin machine went right into action saying, no, he didn't mean that. But unaccountably he said, and maybe he knew something, that next year half of all televisions would have Google TV built in. What? And maybe he knew something because, of course, Google acquired Motorola. Motorola makes set-top boxes. Maybe those new set-top boxes will all have Google TV.
Well, look at the news about Verizon Fios announcing through the side door that they're going to come up with and Motorola may well make it, a single media server in the home, and everything else gets served off the net.
That's the future, isn't it?
That is, it's long should have been in the future, and a lot of that stuff, by the way, that's in the home should still be on the cloud. But that's splitting hairs. Get there, you get rid of the set-top box. What it means is that every TV is on the net, and once every TV becomes net connected, it's connected to Google. Whether it's Google TV or not, I think was a wrong way to say it. But is every in N amount of time, will every new TV in America be able to use Google? Yeah, I'd go for that prediction.
Yeah, you want a browser in your TV now. I think that's kind of it's a weird experience, and you do have the issue of how do we type, how do we control it, how do you move a mouse?
Oh, that's where voice comes in.
Right. That's maybe what the Apple TV will lick. I have to say that I bought a Logitech Google TV when they first came out more than a year ago, $300. They're now $99, and Logitech announced this year. The new CEO of Logitech said it was a $100 million mistake. They'll never make that mistake again. It was always a beta product, never a final. Having now updated, and this has happened since the last time I was on Twig, but I got the update. I like Google TV. I actually plugged it back in, and that's what I use all the time now.
Well, is it hard to configure now the way it was before? Or you don't know because it's already configured?
One of the things we talked about this year was, or maybe it was last year, is plugging it in, and the first thing you have to do is update and update and update and update. But it's actually a pretty straightforward box. It's different from the Roku. So the way the Roku works is one more input to your TV. So, if you have 4 HDMI inputs on your TV and you have a remote control that can choose between them, one of them might be Roku, one of them might be Apple TV, one of them might be your DVR / set-top box / cable or satellite box. And then you switch from the other. Google TV doesn't work that way, and I think in some ways this is smart, and it presages how Google TV will work once it's built into television sets and set-top boxes. It's a pass-through device. So you take the cable, the cable that HDMI cable that's coming out of your set-top box, plug it into the Google TV, and then the Google TV goes into your television. So in effect, when you're watching your cable or your satellite television at all times, your Google TV is available by pressing a button on that full-size computer-style keyboard, and suddenly Google TV pops up as an overlay on top of the satellite TV.
Got it.
And so that's an interesting, different way of thinking about it. And I think in the long run, that's the right way to think about it, which is we don't want to switch and say, well, now I'm going to watch my Roku. Now I'm going to watch my Apple TV. Now I'm going to watch my Boxy Box. Now I'm going to watch my... We want to watch the TV and have all the features built into it. So in effect, the Logitech box, and I think this is true of the Sony box, and certainly it's true of the Blu-ray, become an overlay. Now, in the case of the Blu-ray, it's an overlay on the Blu-ray, not onto the satellite or the cable box. I like that. So if I want to have my browser come up, I can continue to watch Oprah. I guess you don't watch that anymore. I continue to watch Dr. Phil, and I can you can watch Oprah on her cable channel.
Right. And you double the audience, and it'd be good.
Yeah, 2 people, and now we're all watching. And then so I can tweet and still be hearing Oprah and kind of see her behind it. I can search for TV shows. It's a global search mechanism, which is kind of neat. When you do a search, it says, "Well, I'll find it in all the different ways you could possibly get this." That's, right. I think, what people want.
And that's the key, I think, is that if you get to this single server model, then what you're saying is find me what I want wherever the heck it is. If it's on my hard drive, fine. If it's in the cloud, fine. If it's my cloud, fine. If it's in the internet, fine. Just get it to me.
Yeah.
And that's what then
that's
kills
how it should
the
be.
channel. Yes.
Yeah, kills that. It becomes, and this is what happened in music, is we went from music store selling albums, full CDs, to an online service selling songs, a la carte. And that's what television is going to be. You don't care what network or channel even 2.5 Men is on. You just want to watch the show.
Yeah.
Just type in 2.5 Men. There, and it'll say, well, you can watch previous episodes on iTunes. You can get it on Hulu, whatever the choices are.
And
now,
everybody hates that. Google loves it. The artists love it.
ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox hate it.
MSOs hate it.
And the cable companies hate it.
Yeah.
And so they, in fact, the networks block Google TV. That's the single biggest problem right now, is that they're all blocking it. So you are
So
limited.
when you explain that to me, Leo, how that works now after the update.
So you say, I want to find 2.5 Men, and it says it's on ABC's website. You go to ABC's website, and ABC's website says, or whatever. I don't know what network it's on because I don't watch it.
Right.
But it says
CBS.
CBS. Really? I didn't even know that. So because I don't watch that show. But if you did, it would then go to the CBS website, and CBS would say, oh, I see you're here in a Google TV. Forget about it, buddy.
Right. Okay.
Which I have never understood. I'm sure you understand this better. It seems to me, if they're letting you watch it in a browser on your computer, why wouldn't they let you watch it in a browser on your television set? Isn't that the same thing? It's still
this. Oh, you're absolutely right. Of course it is. And they'll get to it at some point. This idea of one device being different from another becomes absurd. And so I think at the web, this is the advantage of the journalist follow-up question if they're hot on it. It would have been nice. It would be really nice to engage Eric in that prediction and say, well,
how?
Tell us more about what do you think the future of TV looks like.
What's the mechanism? Yeah, I would have loved to have that interview too. Maybe we tried to, by the way. And Eric Schmidt's people blew us off. Like, just the great thing, and this is again, and I commend them for this. Some of the people that we tried to get on our web broadcasts, their marketing PR people were, cautious and mealy-mouthed. They said, well, we'll try, and so, but the person never showed, right? Well, we will do our best. The person never showed. Eric's people just said no. They didn't make up a story like Eric's flying out right away or anything. They said no. And I appreciate that. Let's be honest. Yeah. No, he's not going to do it. So we did try to get Eric on our interview at LeWeb, and I promise you, and I hope you will. I know you will also. If either of us ever get to sit down one-on-one with Eric again, we'll ask him that. Well, tell us how that works.
I'll do that.
You know who did get to sit down one-on-one with Eric Schmidt is the folks at D9, Walt Mossberg and Kara Swisher. It was at D9 that Eric said some of the most amazing things this year, and it was so honest and outspoken, and I just love that. Again, that makes him a unique person among CEOs. For instance, this is thanks to Danny Sullivan, who was live blogging at the time. He said that Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook are the gang of 4 major companies that have huge platforms, dominate the space, and are difficult to challenge. Amazon rules in shopping, Apple in beautiful products, Google rules and information, Facebook and friends and identity. He left out, as you might have thought when you listen to this, Microsoft. He says Microsoft is very strong in the enterprise space, and their products will be a flywheel that will power Microsoft for decades. A flywheel, of course, is something that's stored energy and releases it but does not get any new energy. And I think that's fairly accurate.
And there's no Twitter on this list.
There's no Twitter on this list?
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that's not one of the four.
No, it isn't.
Horsemen of the apocalypse here. And I think that's a telling omission.
This year, Google allowed their deal with Twitter to lapse. We don't know.
Still don't know what happened there.
Yeah,
which side dropped that. My impression when I talked to some people at Google was that they could have been just frustrated they didn't have it. My impression almost was that it was Twitter did it. Twitter's being oddly control freakish.
Yeah. Well, I think Twitter is in a difficult situation right now because, one of the reasons they did that web redesign a couple of weeks ago is the problem with Twitter is it's becoming infrastructure. It's becoming a utility. It's becoming a pipeline of signals and information that others capitalize on, which means Twitter can't. So, for instance, most of my Twitter these days comes through Flipboard, both on the iPhone and the iPad. Now, those are all tweets, but I don't ever see the tweets. I just see the content that they point to, which means I also don't see any revenue. I don't send any revenue Twitter's way. Maybe Flipboard does. I don't know. But I think that's...
it goes back to the old saw about distribution and controlling distribution. I saw some talk online this week about whether or not authors should try to cut Amazon out. And somebody at a bookseller said, okay, I understand why you're saying that, but you're cutting your own nose off despite your face.
Right.
Amazon controls more and more tightly with the Kindle and the Fire distribution. And Twitter doesn't control distribution.
Nope. They control nothing.
No.
They merely have a pipe. Well, what they do try to control, and I think this is what happened with Google, is they try to control what they call the fire hose, which is the outpouring of tweets. They do sell this to a couple of people. That was obviously what Google had. In order to index all of the content on Twitter, you need the fire hose.
Right.
And Twitter controls that tightly. And unfortunately, I don't think that's enough leverage for them in the long run. And that's one of the reasons, the other reason perhaps Google Plus exists. I always thought Google Plus was more a Twitter killer than a Facebook killer.
I agree.
He also talked about Apple. Now, Google was big in the news thanks to Walter Isaacson's book, in which Steve Jobs admitted that all he wanted in life, and probably afterlife, is to kill Android. He hated Google. He was furious. We found out that meeting that Steve and Eric Schmidt had in Palo Alto at a coffee shop was all about Eric saying, please, Steve, what can we do? How much can we give you to get you off our backs? And Jobs said, it's not about money for me. They stole the iPhone, and I want to kill them. I'm going nuclear, what do you say, thermonuclear war on this. At the D conference some months before, Google said that they had a, quote, very, very good search partnership and map relationship with Apple. Both deals have been renewed. I have to think, looking at the way Apple has changed things on their phone, the most recent iPhone, and the addition of Siri, that Google's relationship with Apple is not long for this world.
Which if you'd said that to me, and I think you did say that 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I would have said, no, how could they do that? But I think you're right now, Leo. Yeah.
I think that this is but it's part of the scorched earth philosophy. It's not really strategically needed or necessary.
No.
So just so people understand, Google makes money from all platforms, including the iPhone, by search, right? When you in Safari type something in the default search bar, it goes to Google. Right. And they make ad money out of that. But that could change. Siri does, I think increasingly will do searches for people. And Siri doesn't necessarily use Google. It only uses it for web searches, and that, who knows how long that will last.
Well, and at some point, even if Siri does use Google, you won't know it, because Siri is going to come back, I believe, soon with a voice answer to a voice question.
So you won't know or care, and that's the point.
No. And that'll bring a whole new raft of copyright questions. right? Because you can't copyright facts.
Oh, boy.
You can only copyright treatment. So if Siri goes in and does a search for Google,
oh, boy.
and look at some of the things that Google's doing itself, things like flight searches, and you ask Siri, find me the next flight to San Francisco from Newark. Siri could go to Google, come back with the fact of United Flight 123, and never tell you the provenance of that fact, and wouldn't need to under current copyright law.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Because you can copyright the treatment of facts, not the facts themselves.
Because facts is facts.
Otherwise it's like, well, which is part of the problem with patenting genomes and such, right? But so to me, when Siri shifts to voice answers, that kills huge swaths of web media content. And I find that really interesting. Now, of course, Google's doing its own voice thing.
Right.
And Siri right now is not giving you back voice replies. It's giving you back text replies, right?
Right. Well, it gives you voice replies, but not for a web search, not for a fact search.
Right.
And it does pull up Wolfram Alpha on a lot of factual stuff. They obviously have a deal with Wolfram Alpha.
But it gives you a web.
It gives you a page, and it says Wolfram Alpha, yeah.
Right. So that's there, but at some point, if all you want is the fact, and again, Google's doing this themselves. Google's pissed off the entire travel industry by returning flight results now.
Well, let's talk about
that. The facts.
That's another big story this year. IATA. Is that IATA? No, IT. What is it named? ITA it bought.
ITA, I think.
I'm sorry. IATA is something else.
Chat room, you'll tell us.
ITA, which, so ITA was a company that aggregated flight information and was used by Expedia and Travelocity and travel agents and airlines themselves. So when you did a search, they would get the information from the ITA and then put it on their page and allow you to buy tickets. Google acquired the company, and finally the FTC approved the acquisition late this year. And, of course, immediately Google started, if you searched for New York City to Los Angeles, NYC to LA on Google, the first result would be a list of flights with links, and this is what's most interesting to me, back to the airlines. So this is good for the airlines because it re-intermediates them. Bad for Expedia and Travelocity. So here is an example. I did this search NYC on video, if you're watching on video, NYC to LA. Flights from New York City to Los Angeles is the top result under the ads, which is the ads are for JetBlue and cheapflights.com. But those are ads. The first actual search result is a very nicely formatted box, which is interactive. I can change dates. And then I get the flights and the prices. But if you click a link, you say, oh, Unite. And by the way, highlighted the lowest price in bold, so it's quickest to eye. If you click that link, it pulls you to a fuller page on Google. Then if you click the price, what happens? It gives me more information, gives me a return flight. Maybe I don't get a booking. Oh, there it is. Then the red book button pulls up. So in effect, I do all the stuff I would have done on Orbitz or Expedia or Travelocity or with a travel agent on the phone on Google, and then I get the book button. By the way, the book button, if you just click it, goes right to United site. If you click the drop-down arrow, it gives you an ad. So if you're another airline or you were Expedia, you could click the ad, but people have to click the drop-down button. I think it's travel agencies and well, actually, you know what? Maybe I have to get the drop-down. It looks like that's how I do it. Interesting.
For now.
For now. So I'm sure there's going to be some heat from lots of people over this.
But, it's really interesting you raise this, because the more I think about it right now, the more Siri, and I've said this before, but it just really hits me again and again, how it potentially disintermediates much of search.
Yes, but you brought it up. You said the same thing Google's doing with airlines, Siri will do with the entire internet.
Right, and with news, facts, and I think ultimately with commerce, right? So Siri or its competitors, its cousins, become the agents we've long talked about. So you say, Siri, buy me the cheapest copy of, I don't know, public parts that you can find. and it knows who you are, where you want it, how you want it, and it just goes in and gets it. And just as you don't care about the source of information, you don't care about what store they get it from.
Right.
As long as you get it.
Right.
You know, you don't care about what airline. I do care about what airline takes you there, but at some point you don't care which cab company gets you there or certain other things.
Isn't
and
that
so
what the internet, the promise of the internet was all along, which was friction-free commerce?
Yes.
So it destroys brand I guess it destroys brand loyalty.
It does. Well, it already destroyed it. Google. I mean, I learned this long since when I ran a bunch of local online sites. I went to a focus group years and years ago now, more than I'll admit. In Cleveland. Lucky me. And no offense.
I like Cleveland.
Cleveland's very nice. You know, Cleveland, you got to have a joke after the word Cleveland. It's just required.
You know, Cleveland's like Pittsburgh. It's comeback, baby.
Yeah, exactly. I'll stop there. But anyway, so people said, you know, we asked people whether they, you know, had seen some news, and they said, yeah, and where'd you see it? And they said, you know, we knew it was only our story. We were the only ones who had it, but they didn't know it was our brand. Google has long been a brand killer in media. Now the net, you're right, Leo, becomes a brand killer in other fields as well.
Which was always the promise of the internet, and gets us back to an argument we had on TWiT a few weeks ago about SOPA, but I will make it a larger argument, which is that what falls to the internet is old business models, old ways of doing things. Those people are fighting like hell to keep the internet from doing that. It's going to happen anyway. And so I think we can see this transition happening. There will be a lot of disruption and battles and Occupy and lots of things going on as a result of this. But this is very much the way everything, we're headed in a clear direction. And I would say ride the horse in the direction it's going, because...
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, there's one thing that wasn't on our rundown, but you're right. Occupy is a big event in the cloud today, and a big structural change in how society operates. And when I say things like that are that broad and that huge, people get mad at me. But I think we can look back at this year of cloud culture, of
I like
again
that.
going too far, which is what I do, but isn't Occupy Wall Street, isn't to an extent the Arab Spring, the ability of people to connect and find out. As one analysis says, I can't remember whose it was, so I won't get it wrong. But people. The main thing that the internet and connectivity did was tell people that they weren't alone, that they never knew how many other people thought the same way they did, and once they could find that out, that gave them critical mass, and that is culture in the cloud. And this is the year of the cloud starting to have an architectural impact on other parts of society, I think.
Huge. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. And yet we both do the same thing, which is take a bunch of facts and generalize to the point of absurdity and
Guilty,
then say, here's what's happening.
Guilty.
That's our job.
Yes.
Eric Schmidt, when he was talking testifying in front of Congress in September, said that here are the principles that guide Google. And this was, I think, it's not new, but I think a very clear statement of what Google is all about. One, first, always put customers first. Certainly every company should say that. Do you feel Google does that?
Generally, yes. I think Google generally tries to. When they fail, it's that they forget that we're human, and it's not. And so, you know, I saw a post up the other day about a parent who was angry because Google killed the child's email address because of COPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And there was nowhere to get to Google to say, no, but I'm the parent and I want this. What are you doing? And Google would say, I suspect, the media couldn't even get to Google on the point to say, well, we're following the law. That's an example where Google is not human enough.
It's a robot. It's a Python script.
And so that makes a lie of that to the extent that if you go back to the blessed clue train, moment of silence, that markets are conversations are held by people. And too often, Google's not a person. That's the issue with it. But beyond that, I think that culturally, yes, when they test themselves, when they say, did we do right or did we do wrong, that's the standard that they hold up. And they've failed at it. They've failed at it before. They'll fail at it again.
It's difficult to do. It's difficult to do at the scale that Google's working. That's the problem.
Yes.
How do you have a human conversation with 1 billion people?
Yeah.
It's not easy. Boy, I'd like to watch Google solve this because I have this. We all have this issue. As anybody who's a business in the internet world has this issue. It's one of the reasons I do want to keep the audience small, because I can't. It's already unmanageable in terms of one-on-one conversation. This similar thing happened with MG Siegler this week. He set his Google Plus and hence Google profile picture, as he has for a long time on Twitter, to a picture of him flipping the bird. L middle finger.
It's just a finger.
It's
folks.
just a finger. What does it mean? Nothing. It's a finger. It's not it's a representation of genitalia, but it is not genitalia, any more than my saying the word genitalia is genitalia. Google not only didn't allow him to do it, they deleted the picture entirely. Yeah. And again, I think this is where Google has a little bit of a tin ear, but also I can't blame Google. It's the same problem they had with the real names policy. Their heart's in the right place. The devil is in the details. Implementation is impossible.
It's not just the detail, though, Leo. Isn't it also in the Uber principle here? That if Google, when people say, oh, Google, there's ugly stuff on the internet, and you point to it, Google says, we're not in the position of editing the whole world and censoring or controlling the internet. So we're going to go ahead and point to it all. If MG wants to come along and put his picture in there and nobody follows him, wouldn't that be the same? Google now puts itself in the position of violating that core principle on the search side.
I like it.
To say we're going to edit the views that people have of each other in this.
And this is where the upset is, because Google has stayed out of it on search, and now that they're doing social, they've suddenly inserted themselves, if you'll.
So they've got to pull back and have a principle. And it's true of everything we're going through now with internet governance and trying to figure out where we go. If you do one thing, then you've got to be consistent in the long run of where that goes. And I dealt with this a lot in privacy this year, but it's true in areas like this too. It's true about freedom of speech within the realm of Google.
Principle number 2, focus on loyalty, not lock-in. That's kind of to the same point. We don't trap our users like maybe Apple does. If you don't like the answer that Google search provides you, you can switch to another search engine with one click. And if you want to leave other Google services, we make it easy to do that too, thanks to Brad Fitzpatrick and the Data Liberation Organization, Data Liberation Front. You can even take your data with you without any hassle. We want consumers to stay with us because we're innovating and making our products better, not because they're locked in. I do like that philosophy.
I like that. I think it's generally true. The issue where people get wrong when they talk about Google and monopoly and Google being too big and all that, and Google's answer always is that there's an alternative for every service they offer, and that's absolutely true. The exception is where their core business is, which is advertising. And if Google treats an advertiser harshly, the advertiser does not have anywhere else to go when it comes to search advertising. You're not going to get the same performance.
Very good point.
And that's where people are locked. Their true customers are locked in, because like any company, you do want to lock in your customers. Let's be honest. And if you treat them badly, at some point, look at what happened with eBay versus Amazon. When Amazon came along, eBay raised the rates. Amazon came along, offered a comparable service. People left. So the question is, could anyone ever create alternative advertising services that could start to beat down Google if Google is seen to be too controlling? I don't know the answer to that at all, but that's where their vulnerability lies in that principle, I think.
Third, and this might be a subject for a real debate, be open, not closed. Open technology includes both open source, meaning release and actively support code that helps grow the internet, and open standards, meaning we adhere to accepted standards. I think that's true. I think actually Google does absolutely live that faith, even with Android, although many would say, no, Android's not open.
Well, and the argument always is that they don't reveal the algorithm. And of course, you and I know the answer to that. When I interviewed Eric Schmidt, he said, and I'll be curious to see what the world thinks of this, he said that Google is as open as it can be.
That's fair.
I think it's fairly fair. I do. I think that where they were closed in the past, when they didn't reveal things like advertising splits, they finally turned around and did that. I'm sure we could find areas where they should be more open. Let's ask Siva, and I'm sure we can find out. But I think that, again, as an overall guiding principle, they get near it on the freeway. And
they did release the source code for Ice Cream Sandwich at the same time as they released Ice Cream Sandwich.
Yeah.
Fourth, be transparent. This is kind of more of the be open.
Right.
And they do leave out that key element that you brought up, which is the secret formula for Coca-Cola. It's that one ingredient that makes PageRank work.
But logically, they can't do it. It's not
can't.
competitive. It's you're letting the Nigerian princes know.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Okay. Very good point. It's not that somebody would then take the formula and make another Google. It's that if you tell people how PageRank works, they will game it.
Yes, because PageRank is always going to change. PageRank is, PageRank is Matt Cutz's brain to some extent, right?
Right.
And it's not a set solid thing. It's an expertise. It's a way of doing business. It's other things. But if you let people in on the details of that, of how it operates, then you open up to spam and it becomes useless. On Google Plus this week, last week I think was, Google started taking spam comments and graying them out so that you could come along if it was under your post and kill them off. But they let the world know, yeah, we know this is spam. I almost wish they'd go ahead and just kill them off. But they have these ways constantly of trying to stay the one step ahead. And you can't do that if you release all the details.
I closed the article. That was probably a mistake because I have one more thing.
Sleepy, dopey, grumpy. I forget the last.
It's always the last one. Finally, the only constant is change.
Amen.
What? No, that's a.
What do you say?
That's a truism. What do you say to that?
Yeah.
And I think Google, it's funny. Google is now an ancient company in internet years. And I think one of the challenges Larry has going forward is a similar challenge they had at Microsoft, which is how do you keep innovative and entrepreneurial in a company of 20,000 employees? On the one hand, I think Larry Microsoft has had the problem. They did something similar to Google, which is you create small companies within the big company where people can act entrepreneurially and somewhat autonomously. And certainly Google is organized that way. Correct me if I'm wrong, because you know more than I do. But
no.
I believe that's the Google intent. The problem with that is, and Google's experienced this, as has Microsoft, these autonomous companies can fight with each other. They can step on each other. There was that day this year that Google released 3 or 4 products on the same day, which a company acting as a individual would not have done, would have parsed them out. And in Microsoft's case, the internecine rivalries between divisions have actually, I think, severely hurt Microsoft to the point where it's actually a wounded beast.
Yeah.
Google's managed to avoid that, and I'm not sure how they do that so far. But I think that they really do try to keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive in a big company, an old company, and that's the challenge facing Larry Page. Very difficult to do. I think that covers Larry's tenure and the reorganization. We could go through the list of things they killed. Wave finally gone.
Yeah, let me ask you one question. Is there anything on that list that you regret?
That they killed?
Yeah.
No. In fact, I'm having a hard time remembering the list. At the time...
Wave included.
Pardon me?
Wave included.
No, Wave was a flop. With all due respect to Gina, who really loved it and put her heart and soul into a book on it, it was clearly a flop. And I think some of the technologies will survive. They've lost the Rasmussens, the guys who did Maps and then Wave.
Yep.
But Facebook's victory. But I'm looking at anybody there in the chat room, anything that Google killed that they didn't kill. Now, Google Labs, okay, that's an interesting choice. I think that the invention that happened at Google Labs will continue. I don't think that's really what they killed.
Yeah, I think the notion of a centralized lab also becomes limiting. Now, when I worked at Time Inc., they had magazine development, and that was the department that was allowed to invent magazines. So I came along with Entertainment Weekly, and they said, no, we invent magazines, you don't. You can't start that. And after it was killed, Entertainment Weekly started.
Right.
Because you could still sprout up from anywhere in the company.
Right.
And so I think that, when they said they were killing Google Labs, I got upset, and I thought, there goes some of my rules about innovation. But I think it actually is smarter in hindsight that they're allowing that innovation to occur within the divisions.
Right. Somebody in the chat room said, I miss Google Boutiques, boutiques.com, which they're now sending to catalogs and offers. I think that was a sensible thing. Speaking of which, I always thought Boutiques was probably a Marissa Meyer
It just feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, she loves fashion. Marissa spoke again at Le Web, but she's no longer, for a while, I think she was seen as the front person in some ways for Google. She is clearly not. She's not in that group of 6 that I mentioned.
She never was a senior VP.
But she was in the group that runs Google, right, for a while.
But she still wasn't a senior VP.
That's true.
And so I think that Marissa was, how do you say it in sports? Punching above her weight? Is that what you said? Above the rank.
I kind of agree with you.
Right? And I don't mean that in any way about Marissa herself. I mean that about her position in the company,
Right.
that she was put out there because she was good at it.
You could say the same about Matt Cutts. His position isn't that high, but he's often chosen as a spokesperson because he's so good at it.
And liked and smart,
Right.
and they can trust him to do it. So I think Marissa was out there for that reason. But now Larry's. But the irony here, though, is we still don't hear from Larry.
Right, and I wonder if that will change. He's very shy, I think.
Yeah, he has 1 million followers on Google Plus now, supposedly. Yeah. And but
no
he doesn't
posts.
say anything. Yeah.
For a while.
And that's a pity because we want to hear from him.
Yeah, well, for a while he was posting his pictures. We're all going up there after the fact. She is still local. She's still in charge of local. And local is still very important. We can't
Local's
ignore local.
hugely important.
Local is maps, places. Yes, hugely important.
And I go back to the argument about the Senate having gone after the wrong Google. They're going after search when search is yesterday's war, that the future war is mobile, social, local.
Right.
And Marissa is on the forefront of one of those future priorities. And local equals mobile in many, many ways.
We're going to take a break. Jeff Jarvis is here, the author of 2 great books. I'm looking for my copy of Public Parts. I think somebody borrowed it.
It's okay. I can always hold mine up.
Must
No
read.
problem at all, Leo.
Must read.
Yeah, have that new Kindle, that new iPad. Well, there you go.
There you go. And, of course, What Would Google Do, which I do have a copy of. And his blog is buzzmachine.com. Gina Trapani has the week off. She's coming home from her holidays and couldn't join us today, but she will be back next week, of course. And I do want to mention that we are in the running for the best of 2011, the best web tech show, that people should go to tv.com to vote. Now, the URL is long, and I should have made a shortened URL for it, but if you Google tv.com best of 2011 web series tech show or something of the sort, you'll see, I don't know how we got in this esteemed, august group. The candidates in this poll are Circuits with David Pogue, CNET Buzz Report with Molly Wood, Techzilla with Patrick Norton and Veronica Belmont, Walt Mossberg's Personal Technology, and us.
Yeah, I don't know how I got there either.
That's nice. That's a heck of a group. So I'm just going to cast my vote for us, and I invite you to vote your conscience. We are winning, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. Ooh. So far.
Power of Leo, power of TWiT.
Yeah.
TWiT Army, march on.
So if you like to win, if you like to be a winner, if you like to be watching a winner, please go to tv.com and vote. I don't normally lobby for those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But why not?
Yeah, what the heck?
It's fun to win. You know what? We are entering. This is wild. I got an email from the Peabody Awards.
Yay. Long about time the industry recognizes this.
And they have added a category for internet broadcasters. Peabody Awards are among the most prestigious awards for broadcast.
The Pulitzer broadcast.
Yeah.
Really.
And they specifically mentioned Tom Merritt and Tech News Today, but we are going to enter Tech News Today, Twig, and TWiT in the Peabody Awards. And boy, I sure would love. Now that one you don't get to vote for, kids. They've got professionals voting on that one. But I sure would like to. Say the Peabody Award winning This Week in Google. Now that's an award I'd like to win. I can win any Internet Vote Award. All I have to do is lobby. But that's a one I'd like to win. This show brought to you by our friends at Netflix. I don't have to say much about this. I know you all know about Netflix, and I invite you. Look, I have a Netflix coaster. I invite you to go to netflix.com/twit and try it free for 30 days. This is actually something I'd like to mention for those of you visiting family and friends. I know everybody who watches this show probably already gets Netflix streaming. It is, after all, 30% of all web traffic now. More than 30%. But maybe mom and dad, Uncle Bob, sister Sally, cousin Joey, maybe they don't know about it because, you know, they're not geeks like us. Tell them about it. Turn them on to it. Netflix.com/twit. They can watch on their iPhone, iPad, Android phone, television, Blu-ray, Xbox, on and on. Play PS3. And it's just, you know, thousands of great movies for just $8 a month. What, I mean, what's wrong with that? Netflix.com/twit. Give it a try if you're not a member. And if you are, tell your family. Tell them. And we do not have an offer code in the UK yet, but they are launching in the UK. Thank you, Sparky. And when they do, I'll make sure we get an offer code for you. That's exciting. That's really exciting. Somebody says, as Bill in Michigan, I love Bill. He says, as prestigious, I know, as the Peabody Awards are, I can't help but think of Sherman and the Wayback Machine when I hear Peabody. Mr. Peabody. He was the dog that wore glasses. Thank you, PC Guy. He has given us a short URL for the TV.com voting page. It's a bit.ly URL, bit.ly/TVComTwit. TVComTWIT. Who owns TV.com?
The chat room is trying to raise it by 5%.
I bet we could. Chat room alone probably could. That just shows you, give us some idea of how many people have voted so far. Does CNET own them? I thought TV.com was owned by AOL. I can't remember now. Maybe it is CNET, which would be funny because there's a CNET.
Funny, since they're number 2, yes.
Google bought Motorola this year, and that has been approved or not? Has that been approved? I think it was.
Not yet. I don't believe
yet.
that still has time to go. Right.
That's an interesting story because, of course, Motorola is one of the big Android handset manufacturers. There was some concern by the other handset manufacturers that Motorola would have some advantage in the Android marketplace. And Google confirmed their fears by saying, yeah, I think we'll make some phones. So the current Google phone, which is made by Samsung, the Galaxy Nexus, might be the last not made by Motorola Mobility. But what Google really got with Motorola Mobility was its patent treasure trove. They paid $4 billion. I'm sorry. They were trying to pay $4 billion for Nortel's 6,000 patents, which ended up going to Microsoft and Apple. You need to have those patents to fight in the patent wars. They paid $12.5 billion for Motorola Mobility, but they got, I don't know what, something like 20,000 patents. And
given our earlier conversation, Leo, about TV,
yeah, they got set-top boxes.
I think the set-top box thing, I underestimated the importance of that strategically.
It's a huge TV play because, along with Cisco, Motorola makes almost, I would say more than half of all set-top boxes. So it's a big, 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 big business and a good way to get into the home. Something Microsoft always wanted to do. Never could make that deal.
True. I remember I was at Cable Labs when I was peripherally involved with the cable company years ago, and Microsoft was constantly trying to get into the boxes of the industry and not succeeding.
So here's the list of, thanks to Eileen Rivera, our crack producer, who's so good, of Google businesses that got the axe this year. Aardvark.
I can't even remember Aardvark.
I'm saying, you will not miss these. We should have had a montage with a sad song, but just imagine, if you will, a sad song and these logos that you never saw anyway floating across the screen. Google Security, Fast Flip, Google Desktop, Google Pack, Google Image Labeler, Google Notebook, SideWiki, Google Health, I might miss that one, Google Power Meter, and all the Google Green initiatives, I think, and PhotoVine. There you go.
Well timed. That was yeah.
Wow, that was beautiful. That was a moving moment in television history. And Google Labs, of course.
That'll get us a Peabody, man.
Put that in the Peabody reel.
Smoke it.
That's web TV right there, kids.
Web gold, man.
Yeah. They also retired App Inventor, which was an easy to use way to make Android apps, but apparently nobody used. Yep. They did open source the code. We love that. They also killed Null, which was their Wikipedia, I guess, or Mahalo or something.
Right.
And Wave. We mentioned that already. I don't think any of those will be missed, and I think the focus is welcome. I think this is Larry is right. Let's focus.
Yep.
Do what we do best. Android, maybe the biggest Google story of the year, absolutely just came on strong in 2011, became a really successful competitor to Apple's iPhone, and depending on whose statistics you believe, Android is beating iPhone in almost every respect. Number of devices, installed base, number of activations a day, even in arguably the most important space, number of apps. I guess once you get past a few 100,000, it doesn't really matter. There are only a handful of Apple's iPhone apps that I don't have on my Android phone, Instagram being the one that leaps to mind. I bought the Galaxy Nexus. I bought the GSM version, not the Verizon version, and was, you know, I haven't yet reviewed it on this show, and Gina, I'm sure, has already talked about it. I know she likes.
Yeah, well, you did talk about it when you got it, and then Eileen excoriated you last week.
Did she?
Yes.
Eileen or Gina?
Both did.
But both said how much they loved it.
Yes, and how wrong you were.
Good.
And how unhappy they are with you and disappointed they are in you, Leo, as a result.
I guess no, I guess what I would say is this, like all the other Google phones, is for developers, not for real people. That this, and this is the problem I see. I know Eileen's running in. She doesn't have a mic.
That's why I love you, because you only get more trouble, yes.
She doesn't have a mic. I think people don't understand that the Google reference phones are not necessarily the popular phone. These are for developers who want a plain Google experience, developer menu.
Are you saying that the manufacturers and the phone companies improve them with their stuff they add to them?
Well, I think you could make the case for maybe HTC Sense. I like Samsung TouchWiz. I know some people don't. But you're right. If you don't want any cruft from the manufacturer, you still get carrier cruft, by the way, on the Verizon version. But this unlocked GSM version has zero cruft. Nothing from manufacturers, nothing from carrier, because there is no carrier. It's a carrier-free phone. Here are my issues. One on the phone, and it's just a personal issue. It's a pen tile display. I see significant color noise on any solid color, particularly white. It's disrupting. I don't think it's fair to call it a 1280 by 720 display because of the way they use subpixel rendering. It's a technical argument. It's an argument many people won't see. Before you buy this phone, look at a white screen. Best way to do it probably is open the messaging app. If there are no messages, you'll see a big white screen. And if you don't see pixelation and color noise in that display, then go ahead, by all means, buy it, because it is a high-res display, and I just don't think it's as good as many of the other choices out there. And
given my aging eyes, what bothered me was when you said that the type just gets small.
Well, and that can be fixed by a proper application development, but it is whenever you go to higher resolution, people need to understand higher resolution means smaller. I'm not a fan of the pen tile display. You can buy, and I have ordered from Samsung, a bigger battery, a much bigger battery, which I think they declined to put in here because it does makes the profile, which is very thin right now, thicker. But I think with the bigger battery life won't be a problem. And the other issue I had, and this really is for this show, the big debate is, I think Ice Cream Sandwich is mistaken. I think Google's making a big mistake on this. What they, in one respect only, I like the new camera app. It's great. I like the new calendar and contacts apps. They're great. I'm not talking about the apps. I'm talking about the operating system itself. The decision to go with soft buttons, to move the search button to the top of the screen where it takes up real estate and cannot be removed, and the fact that these buttons not only take up screen real estate, so this so-called big display really isn't any bigger than any other phone because you've got these inches lost here. I think the soft button thing is a huge mistake. So maybe Ice Cream Sandwich will be great on older Android phones, which will have physical buttons and will work with Ice Cream Sandwich. I think losing the search button and the menu button at the bottom is crazy. Crazy. This is a tablet operating system badly ported to a smaller form factor. That's, of course, just my opinion. But I think it's something people should consider before they run out and say, oh, this great phone, which is $300, I want it. I think Google might have made a mistake on Honeycomb. But, you know, Google's never been the king of UI design.
No, no.
And I think it's showing, frankly. I think they should try. I know there's a limited number of great UI designers in the world. Maybe they all work for Apple and Facebook. I don't know. But I think Google needs to find one quick.
So Leo, if Android, as you said, came on really strong this year and really got Google into mobile and local and devices and all of that, right? And then along comes Google Plus later in this year where they are trying to get into social. I hate predictions, but where do you think Google might or should go next strategically? If they're going to do a limited number of things, what's the next big thing in that list?
I think one thing that they need to acknowledge about Android is that it is it's succeeding as, I think, the low-end smartphone. It's succeeding with it's penetrating the low end of the market more than it is, I think, the high end of the market. I think Apple's iPhone continues to own that. Google probably doesn't care. They just want traffic, and they're going to get it. They're going to get a billion users any day now on Android, and especially in markets where smartphones are too expensive, Android is going to be a great choice. You might be surprised by analysts have already said this, and I poo-pooed it for a long time, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Windows Phone take some market share once it comes out on Nokia. I think Nokia is going to make a strong run for it. Although, if I were BlackBerry at this point, I'd sure look at Android or Windows Phone. I'd sure get out of that business. What should Google focus on? I don't know. That's a good question. You sure?
If you go back to the four horsemen,
Apple, Facebook, Google, and Amazon.
Amazon retail.
No, I think that would be a mistake. I think in some respects, Google might be making a mistake focusing so much on content. I think YouTube is, in some ways, YouTube is a liability. Boy, this is going to be controversial. A liability for Google. Because YouTube, unfortunately, because they're trying to make these content deals, is kind of it, to me, represents the pro-SOPA forces. It represents...
It puts them in channel conflict.
It puts them in channel conflict. And I think that this is actually not a good thing for Google. So if I were going to focus, this is very controversial, I would dump YouTube.
Wow. Whoa. Whoa. What would they lose if they gave it up?
Well, as somebody pointed out in the chat room, they're certainly getting a lot of those Google Plus signups from YouTube because you have to create a Google account to have a YouTube account now. I'm sure they're giving up revenue, but it's a crappy kind of revenue. In order for Google to succeed with YouTube, they have to put in very annoying ads on top of the video. Pre-roll will come soon.
Right, so you go back to Louis C.K. The fact that there are Louis C.K.'s out there that exist is almost sufficient for Google. Just the way the fact that there are newspapers and book publishers and bloggers and all that is good for Google. As long as there's content out there and growing, that's what they really need.
I agree.
Is that the argument?
Yes. Let somebody else do YouTube. You don't need it, Google. And it's going to put you in channel conflict. It's already putting you in, I'm sorry to say, but putting you in the devil's corner when it comes to content.
They're not getting revenue from it that's significant.
Well, I don't know. That's one thing I don't know.
No profit. They're not getting profit from it.
Yeah, it's got to be hugely expensive.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't spend that much for it. It looked like a lot at the time, but now with Motorola, $12.5 billion, YouTube was, you know, just a few $1 billion.
Yeah.
I would spin it off, sell it. Spinning it off is probably the best thing. In fact, I'll make a prediction. I would not be at all surprised, and I think they will spin off YouTube this year.
Well, that's interesting, too, because that also, that does a few things, right? That puts it at arm's length. They can still own a big piece of it. And it starts to deal with the antitrust stuff, which I don't think should come up, but is going to come up inevitably because Google, you know, is too big.
Yeah. Make Google smaller. I mean, the whole thing was about focus, right? So if you want to focus, what is I think a big part of Google right now that is drawing focus in the wrong direction, it's YouTube.
All right, so play it one step further. If Google didn't fully own YouTube, does that help their cause with the networks and Google TV or not?
Well, isn't that interesting? Because it sure hasn't helped them now. Up to this
so they
point.
don't have it if they're not seen as a competitor.
It can't get any worse.
So if Google is merely a discovery mechanism for video.
Don't you like it better?
Networks are foolish not to be discovered by that mechanism.
Don't you like it better? I already think that somewhat YouTube is being treated as an arm's length partner already. I think that the people who work at YouTube do not consider themselves Googlers to some degree.
The offices are crappy.
Yeah, I think this is going to happen.
That's really, I'd never heard that before. That's very interesting there.
And it should happen. So that's my thought. How about you?
Wow.
What would you do? What would Jarvis do?
I think I'm going to go back to retail because I think there's an opportunity not to become a retail company, but to start to disintermediate retail like mad. That in an era of price transparency, in an era that we said earlier of Siri or Google equivalent being able to just buy you something. When I talked with Philip Kaplan, Pud, who was then working closely with, what's the name of his company? The one where you could put up what you bought.
Yeah, I know, because I was a big fan of that. And then,
part of his strategic view was that at some point, everybody says where they buy stuff. Blippi then knows where the cheapest one is, and it disintermediates all of shopping because you go in and say, "Hi, Blippi, I'd like an HDMI key." Blippi says, "I know where to get you one for 50 cents." Okay, I don't care. Just get it to me.
right.
And so, could Google do that?
Better than
Yeah.
Blippi, yeah. The problem with Blippi is you had to give them your credentials, and then your purchase was exposed. It just really felt to people like, bleh, I'm giving
it
away
became
too
a
much.
content issue and,
Right.
and more about reviews and all that. But I think
So
if Google came
Facebook
along,
can do that, and it probably will. I suspect Google will as well in response.
So could Google network every retailer other than Amazon in the country and let them compete for purchases that Google brings to them?
So this is, to go back to that argument I made about the a la carte music thing, the way Steve Jobs was able to convince the music labels to do something that they thought was not in their interest. They made a lot of money selling aggregated albums because there was only one good cut on there, and they were able to sell all these other bad cuts.
It was good while it lasted.
It was good while it lasted. Steve Jobs' argument, there were a number of reasons he was able to do this. One is because they thought Apple, well, big deal. It's never going to be a big player. We don't have to worry about them. So part of it was stealth. He sandbagged them. But I think he also was able to make the argument, look, you're going to get getting killed by piracy. You've got to come up with a solution. People able to click 99 cents. It's an easier one-click deal. I think Google needs a similar argument to get this to happen. Same thing with television networks. They need a similar argument. They need to be able to go to the networks. They need to be able to go to retailer channels and say, and I don't know what this argument is, but it's going to happen anyway. The internet's going to get you. You might as well ride the horse in the direction it's going, and we will give you a way to do that so that you have a business model going forward. That's to me, where Google ultimately can own the world.
Google becomes the true biggest platform company there is.
Absolutely.
And that's what it really is. It's
Absolutely.
a platform for
It's a
advertising, it's a
platform.
platform for knowledge.
Absolutely.
It's a platform for geography, location, all kinds of things.
There it is. We figured it out.
There we go.
Jeff Jarvis, you see, when we get together, when the great minds get together, we've solved this. I hope Eric, Larry, Sergey, I hope you're listening. And we'll take this to heart. And by the end of next year, we'll be saying, see, we'll be playing that clip and saying, see, Google figured it out. We told them what to do.
Right.
Jeff Jarvis is the author of What Would Google Do? And his new book, just out in paperback, Public Parts, right? No. What Would Google Do is in paper. This is in paperback. Public Parts still in hardcover, but of course on Kindle and Audible, right?
Audible, too. Audible, I think, has a deal today on what Google do. And by the way, I put up links on my blog to where to buy the books for Kindle and all that on Christmas Day. And some people thought that was rather crass of me, but
not
it's
at
on my blog if you
all.
want to see it.
This, now, just understand that when an author publishes a book, the publisher gives him a tiny little royalty. Something like 10% of half the cover price is fairly typical. Because the publisher only gets half the cover price. The bookstore charges a cover price. The publisher gets half of that. And then the publisher takes a percentage, usually 5, 10, 15, if you're lucky, percent of that, and gives it to the author. Meanwhile, Amazon gives you, 5% of the cover of the price they sell it for.
Yeah.
In addition to what you're already getting for your publisher. This is a completely legitimate way. If you love Jeff, it doesn't cost you anymore. He just gets more money if you buy his books from those links. I'm presuming you use the Amazon.
I just used the Amazon one, that's all. But I didn't mean to go for the super plug here. But
no, look at it. Can I tell you what a huge difference to the bottom line it makes if you click that? And this is good for every author. if you buy the books through the Amazon associate code that the author has on their webpage, it costs you no more money, but they will get like 3 times more money.
You know that Best Buy has an API so that you can put your own store on top of it.
Oh, that's neat.
I would love to see the TWiT store.
Okay. Where we put our recommendations for products?
Exactly.
That's a great idea.
And if you're going to buy them through TWiT.
If I had more energy, I would be doing that.
You now have 19 people.
I know.
It's one of their jobs.
If they had more energy, I would. They're taking the week off. But that's a very good. We actually looked at that. Amazon does something similar. You can make an Amazon. We could make an Amazon TWiT store, and then we'd get associate fees for all of that stuff. It'd probably be a significant amount of revenue, especially now that Amazon's made a deal with California so that we can make associate revenue again. Jeff, always such a pleasure.
It's, as always, I mean, it's such an honor to be on the show and an honor to be around you and the TWiT Army, and a great year, and I look forward to next year.
Thank you.
So,
Jeff Jarvis.
Gina, we miss you. We'll see you next week.
Yes, we'll be back. We do this show at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern time.
And on the 11th, we're doing something different. We're doing the 11th show on the 9th.
Oh, because of CES, we're moving it.
So on Monday the 9th, just so people know in advance.
Yeah, so we will still do it, and I will be here for that.
And I will too.
And we, of course, make this show available in audio and video, high-quality video, as well as smaller files for those of you on bandwidth constraints or on smaller devices at twit.tv. That's the place to get it. Do subscribe. That way you'll get every issue. You won't miss an episode. TWIT.tv. Thank you, JJ.
Thank you, sir.
Happy New Year. We'll see you next week
too.
on Twig.